Another edition of the popular It Sports Magazine TV. Remember our slogan, we are dedicated and devoted to you, the sports fan. Today our guest is Night Sports Production AFC West correspondent, Dr. David Alexander. Dave, before we start, let me introduce our editorial panel for It Sports Magazine. My name is Jeffrey Neal Fox, and I'm proud to be the publisher of It Sports Magazine. Leo Haggerty, who carries our torch, is our editor-in-chief of It Sports Mag, and is also a founding father of Night Sports Productions. Adam Schnapstyler is a seasoned columnist, and I'm glad that he's on board tonight. Abigail Hope is a columnist for It Sports Magazine and an intern from the University of Tampa's prestigious sports management program. Now that we know who everyone is on our panel, can you give our viewers a quick synopsis of what Dr. Dave Alexander is doing today?
Well, I am living out on the West Coast. Thank you, first of all, for the introduction, Jeff. I appreciate it. It's good to see all these friendly faces and Leo. I'm living out on the West Coast, Portland, Oregon, where I've been now for the past 20 years. Sort of actively retired is probably the best way to put it. Still doing a variety of different things. Mostly trying to salvage my golf game right now. That's the most important thing. I'm getting ready for the football season. Very enjoyable summer so far, although it's supposed to get hotter over the next couple of days. But that's sort of a quick bio of what I've been doing. Living out here with my wife and one of our kids, our other kid, as I mentioned, Abby, a former lacrosse player, is now living in Denver, Colorado. Yeah, that's sort of the short, quick and dirty bio of my life right now, at least anyway.
Hey, Dave, I know Jeff touched on it before, but along with the great Leo Haggerty, you're one of the founding members of Night Sports Production, which goes back over 20 years. Could you give us a little overview of how you got involved with KSP?
Well, I've known Leo a very, very long time. I'm going to stop at two varies in this particular conversation. And yeah, I mean, this is one of the things we've always sort of kicked around. Leo's always been sort of the entrepreneur of the group, and talked about doing this. We did a lot of stuff on the radio for a good long period of time. And again, a number of good friends and colleagues that have sort of stuck together. And one of the things that always brought us together was sports. And really with Leo's guidance, we sort of got the Night Sports program started. And really, again, trying to get that sort of regional view of what was going on in sports. Also looking at a variety of different sports as well, too. And just getting that sort of different perspective from folks at a variety of times. Yeah, that's probably how we really got started. That's probably the shortest version of how we got started with that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Now, you also worked at the home team scout for Blesto, covering the Ravens. I know we covered the Buccaneers for scout. Tell our viewers what that was like.
That was a great experience because I started the first year the Ravens moved from Cleveland to Baltimore. And it was a great experience. Brand new organization in Baltimore. It was really Ozzie Newsome's first year as a general manager, so a chance to watch a team being put together, foundation team being put together. There were some tough times then. Really didn't settle in a quarterback that first year. But I remember the two players that impressed me the most the very first year were Jonathan Ogden and Ray Lewis, two guys who are now in the Hall of Fame. It was a great experience watching a team sort of being built from the bottom up. A lot of patience back in those days. I'm not sure you'd see that kind of patience in an organization today. But it was the beginning of what has been, and I think consistently has been, one of the great programs in the National Football League. And it really all started with that Ravens team back in the 90s. Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about football, and I learned a lot about how organizations are built. I was very fortunate to be there at that time.
You've been credentialed at a lot of football games. Besides that fun you just were talking about, which game was your most memorable, and why was that?
Well, I have to say again, the Ravens, the very first game in the new stadium, the Pittsburgh Steelers came to town, and I had a wonderful experience. I was there really covering the Ravens, but sitting in a section full of Steelers fans. And if you know this, I'm sure it's happened in Tampa. Steelers fans travel very well. So out of about 62,000 people, a good 25,000 were Steelers fans. And yeah, the excitement of a new stadium. The Ravens, I think, had finished 2 games out of the playoffs the previous year. The Steelers were just starting to get back to where they had been before that. Cordell Stewart was the starting quarterback that year for the Steelers. So both teams were sort of on the rise. And that rivalry that had started with the Browns and the Steelers moved to the Ravens and the Steelers as well, too. So very, very exciting game that time as well, too. Covered some NCAA basketball games as well, too. And again, I think we can all agree that's the one thing we've missed the most over the past years is live sports. There's really nothing like sort of a high energy live sporting event. And both sort of doing it, some analyzing it as a fan. Great experience. I'm really looking forward to getting back to that as soon as possible this year as well, too.
You know, Dave, the AFC West for the past 2 years, it's been the Kansas City Chiefs and then everybody else. You cover the Las Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Chargers for KSP. Do you expect to see either of those teams step up to challenge the Chiefs, or is it the rest of the AFC West playing for a wild card spot?
Well, right now, I think the Chiefs are still the class, not just of the division, but of the conference. Yeah, they're still a very well-run organization. Mahomes is arguably the best quarterback in the NFL right now, and I think it'll be difficult for either of the two teams, the Chargers or the Raiders, to catch up to them. I think if they're lucky, one of them, maybe both, but I think one of them would have a wild card slot this year as well too. We had this conversation last year, and I think they both were recognizing they had to get everything right last year to even be a wild card team. And I think both teams really in that same position again. They're looking up at the Chiefs, and they got to work really, really hard, I think, to catch one of them. I think the Chargers had a chance to beat the Chiefs during the regular season last year. Chiefs pulled it out kind of late in that game. I think it happened with the Raiders as well. The Raiders beat them last year, as a matter of fact. But it's a chase. Over the long run, barring any real bad injuries, the Chiefs are still a team to beat. And I think both the Chargers and Raiders realistically understand that. They'd love to win the division, but the reality is it's probably going to be a wild card for one of the two teams.
Okay, let's start with the Raiders. Vegas was 6-2 on the road, which was great, but 2-6 at home. Was that due to the COVID forcing the Silver and Black to play their home games with no fans in Allegiant Stadium, or are there other factors? Head coach John Gruden, my buddy, you can see his bobblehead behind me. His troops couldn't defend their house. What's the story?
Well, I think it was a combination. I really think playing in that empty building, I don't know if you've been to Las Vegas in the past year or so, it's a pretty magnificent building. It really is. And I think having that large building, domed building with nobody in it, I think certainly had an effect on them as a team as well. I will also say they had a bunch of issues as well, too. The turnovers was a big one. A lot of breakdowns defensively where they just did not defend very well. And I think, and I'm going to be kind to Coach Gruden, I think this is really a very crucial year for the Raiders. I think the bloom is worn off on the John Gruden situation. Well, he's got, 6 more years in the contract. I think he really has to produce this year. They've had 2 really good drafts now. They got a lot of cap space. And I think blaming it on the players is not as easy as it's been the past couple of years. We'll see what happens. I think they will play better this year. They'll be playing in front of home fans. People coming from the Bay Area are going to be there this year. In fact, I just saw an ad a while ago about ticket packages from Oakland and San Francisco to Las Vegas. I think that will certainly help them and juice them up a bit. But I think it's a very, very important year for the Raiders as an organization, quite frankly.
Okay, well, I know we're all tough on Chucky, but Chucky can be very tough on his players, especially the quarterback. Is David Carr the guy in Vegas, or are they going to look to replace him sooner than later?
Good question. Again, one of the issues that I think will hang over David Carr this year is Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, this is one of the teams he talked about going to was the Raiders, and I think if he can't work out a long-term deal with Seattle, I think Gruden will look longingly to Seattle to think if he can pry Russell Wilson away from the Seahawks, have him come down and play. I think David Carr's a good quarterback. He may not be a great quarterback, but I certainly think he's a good quarterback. If you look at where quarterbacks are, he's kind of underpaid actually along the way. I think it would help him a bit. And again, Gruden's tough on all of his players. I think a pat on the back for David Carr from John Gruden every once in a while would really be appreciated. I think it would help Carr's attitude. I think it would help the team's attitude as well, to knowing that Gruden kind of had David Carr's back along the way. But look, this league is make it or break it. And if Carr has another bad year, I would not at all be surprised if Gruden goes otherwhere to find someplace else to find a quarterback. I think I'll certainly look at Seattle first if Seattle can't work out whatever the issues are with Russell Wilson. Because I think Gruden believes Wilson will be the perfect quarterback for the Raiders with all the talent they have. And they have a lot of talent. It's a very talented offensive team.
Hey, Doc. I hope it's okay if I call you Doc here.
Absolutely.
Trying to get to a little more important matters here. You do cover the AFC West and the Raiders, and Carl Nassib made news yesterday, or 2 days ago, I think actually now, becoming the first active player to announce that he was gay. Were you surprised that that happened, or alternatively, maybe surprised that it took this long?
Well, I was surprised that it happened. Actually, the second part, I was probably surprised that it took this long. And Nassib mentioned in one of his statements that he's been struggling with this for 15 years. So his professional career, his college career, going back to high school, he's been struggling with how to deal with his own sexuality and what it means to be a football player. But I think the reality is, since we really haven't seen the kind of uproar around this particular issue, that first of all, I think it's sort of time for that. Look, the reality is that there have been gay players in the NFL probably since the beginning of the NFL. But they've had that very difficult life of trying to survive that and all that goes with being a player and the stuff that we don't see that goes on in locker rooms and meetings and dealing with your fellow players as well too. I think Nassib felt comfortable enough to come out. I believe he talked to a bunch of players before he did it. I think people were aware this was going to happen. I don't know if he talked to the coaching staff, but I'm certainly sure he talked to a bunch of players about this. What we've heard so far has been universally positive. I'm sure there'll be some detractors, and he's going to hear some things over the course of the game, either from players, certainly from fans, that is going to be really kind of out of bounds. But he seems like a smart guy. He seems that he's really thought this through. And as he said, he's been dealing with this for 15 years. He probably realized this was the time for it to happen. I'm sure it's a great relief for him. I'm sure it's going to make his individual life easier. I believe it'll make his football life easier as well too. So, and again, I think also Abby's probably the one exception. Adam, I'm not sure how old you are. The world is coming around to this. Younger generation realizes this is not, it's not the crime that we once used to consider it being. And I think that recognition alone, I think, made Carl comfortable when he probably said to one or two players, I'm going to come out. And they said, okay, big deal. He's got to produce on the field, and whatever his sexuality is, if he's not doing the job on the field, that will be the ultimate judgment against him. But I think the fact that we haven't heard a whole lot over the past couple of days shows that we've kind of moved on from that. Now, we might hear it again as we get closer to both training camp and as the regular season starts. And I'm sure he's going to be asked a question from the media once the season starts as well, too. And probably some of his teammates be asked as well, too. But I think by then, everyone will have their answer pretty much laid out. And we'll go on from there. We'll just go on from there.
Dave, you brought up this point. When you look at the 2020 stats, Vegas was atrocious in turnovers on both sides of the ball, only causing 15 turnovers on defense. That was 30th in the NFL. And they coughed up the pigskin 26 times, 16 of them fumbles. That was dead last in the league. The Silver and Black drafted Alabama offensive tackle Alex Leatherwood with their first pick. He may be more suitable to play guard, but nevertheless, he will help in both the run game and in pass protection. Still, with that being said, do you think that's the major point of emphasis for improvement for the Raiders if they want to become a playoff contender, is cutting back and causing more turnovers?
Well, first of all, I mean, the defense just has to play better from the beginning. And again, we go back to one of the interesting things, and Jeffrey came up with that statistic about how well they did on the road. The majority of those turnovers the defense caused were actually on the road as well, too. So I think that was another place where the numbers might not match what we saw in the field itself, but they seem to play better on the road defensively. And I think that's why they really have to address the turnovers. Gus Bradley's a new defensive coordinator. If he can replicate anything close to what he did in Seattle, I think it's just going to be a better team. They got to run the ball better. A lot of the errors, Carr sometimes gets a little sloppy handling the ball, but he held the ball a lot. He had a lot of third and longs last year where he just held the ball too long. The offensive line wasn't very good. Leatherwood hopefully can start for them this year. That'll be an upgrade over what they had last year. Why Tom Cable has continued to be a line coach in the NFL is beyond me. He continues to, everywhere he goes, the offensive line, he was in Seattle for like 5 or 6 years. They were awful. And he goes from that job to the Raiders, and bad coaching seems to follow him. Josh Jacobs, for the past 2 years, has been one of the most productive running backs in the National Football League, but you got to have an offensive line to help you run. And again, I think this is one of the issues Carr has to deal with as well, too. Not holding the ball nearly as long, and then not always feeling he has to throw, the touchdown every time he throws the ball. So better defense is number one. They got to cause more turnovers. That's Gus Bradley's number one responsibility. Number two, they've got to be more, I think, balanced on the field. Another good year from Josh Jacobs would be great. Yeah, I think he's been the fifth most productive running back the last 2 years in the National Football League. They got Darren Waller, who is becoming one of the premier tight ends in the league. They have the weapons. The key now is to use them, I think, in a better sort of a way. Keep David Carr upright. Let him get rid of the ball before he fumbles. Cut down to the third and longs. I think all those things will just make them a better offensive football team, quite frankly.
Going off of that, Raiders were 8-8 in 2020. Now, no NFL team will remain exactly the same. Do you predict a better or worse 2021 season?
Good question. I think they're better. The question is, are they one game better, 2 games better? They open the season against the Ravens, the Steelers, the Dolphins, and the Chargers. Those are their first 4 games to start the season. Yikes. I think if they can come out of that 2-2, they're a 10-win team, I think, a 10-win team. But, I said this last year. I thought they were a 10-win team last year. Again, lack of turnovers, Carr's issues, not playing well at home, as Jeff talked about. All those things were held against them. I'm going to pick 10-6. I think they're a 10-6 team. But as with a lot of NFL teams, a lot of things have to go right. They got to run the ball better. Carr has to have a better year. Their defense has to play better. I think if those things happen, they're easily a 10-win team. But again, they've got to come out of those first 4 games. They got to win at least 1. If they can win 2 of those first 4 games, I think they're definitely on their way to a 10-win team, a 10-win season. Absolutely.
Doc, let's shift gears to the Chargers. You were pontificating to anyone who had listened before the 2020 draft that Justin Herbert from Oregon was the best quarterback prospect in the draft. You're out on the West Coast in Portland, so you had a chance to see the former Oregon standout up close and personal. What did you see that made you so adamant and correct that Herbert was that guy?
Well, I wouldn't say I pontificated, but I've been out here now for 20 years, and one of the sayings out here is it's not an East Coast bias, it's an East Coast bedtime. A lot of people never got to see Herbert play football, east of the Mississippi River. He had 3 different coaches in 4 years. He had 4.5 different offensive coordinators. He never had a quality wide receiver he played with all that time, but every year he followed Marcus Mariota. Every year he got better and better and better and better. He was the MVP of the Rose Bowl in his last game. Smart kid. He won I forget what they call the academic Heisman Award. He won that, graduated 3.5 years from University of Oregon. Just a really, really quality player. Now, the questions were, because he's not that mobile, although he scored 3 rushing touchdowns in the Rose Bowl. Again, with the trend towards more mobile quarterbacks, not that mobile quarterback. But he immediately goes to the NFL where he's playing with quality wide receivers, really smart kid. And this is the thing that the Chargers talked about last year. And they're talking about this year with the new offensive coordinators. He picks things up very quickly. Herbert's one of those guys, you show him once or twice and he gets it. And I think, again, because they didn't have a great running game last year, he threw the ball a lot more than they expected. But he's got great wide receivers, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Hunter Henry, a great tight end. Quality wide receivers, I think he realized how much talent he really has. It was a surprise he played as well as he did, but I certainly thought he was going to be an NFL quarterback because he's got all the intangibles you want in a quarterback. Really smart, and again, he took those qualities you learned at Oregon and elevated them at the next level. And I think the Chargers have their quarterback for the next 10 to 12 years, which you can't say for a lot of quarterbacks that have been chosen in the past couple of years, picking out of that rookie crop as well. And again, not having to wait 2 years or 3 years to come out, taking the job because the starter gets a punctured lung in like the second game of the year. All those things are working against him, and he ends up getting the job and he's offensive rookie of the year in the NFL. So I have nothing but high hopes for Justin Herbert. And I think he's got a really bright future. Again, he gets overlooked because he's playing in the same division with Pat Mahomes, but quality quarterback. And the Chargers are very lucky to have him.
You know what, Dave? The LA Chargers, they're not a problem throwing the football. The Achilles heel for the Chargers is running the football. They only average 3.8 yards per attempt, and that was 30th in the NFL. That has to improve if the Lightning Bolts want to be playing in January, correct?
Yeah, Austin Eckler is really the key for them. Eckler 2 years ago was terrific. I think he gained close to 1,400 yards 2 years ago. Hurt much of last year, and the Chargers drafted 2 running backs last year, Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly. Neither one of them really stepped up very well. Chargers also with problems on their offensive line, which also made Herbert's year look even better because their offensive line, quite frankly, wasn't very good. Yeah, they got to be able to run the ball. Herbert got hit a lot, didn't get sacked as much, but got hit a lot last year. And when you've got your franchise quarterback for the next 10 years, you can't have him get knocked around as much as he got hurt last year. So Eckler's the key. He says he's healthy this year, feeling good. They've got, again, new offensive coordinator with Joe Lombardi. They believe they're a better team with better balance, but Austin Eckler is really the key. If Eckler is healthy, they can go a long way. Now, it's the NFL, so no one stays healthy for the entire season, but I think Eckler is really the key. If not Eckler, they've got to get better games out of the backups. If either Kelly or Jackson plays nearly as well, I think they'll be okay with the running game. But no, you're absolutely right, Leo. They got to run the ball better. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't think that the Chargers just took Rashawn Slater. I like to think that they sprinted up to the podium to get that pick in as quickly as possible when they saw that he was available.
Yeah.
Now, he's about as polished as a lineman as you can get, and he can play all 5 spots. So that's got to help the running game, also protect Justin Herbert, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very good point about sprinting up to the podium. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, they again, there's like a lot of teams, particularly tackles. And as you say, he's one that can step in. And you know, you guys have college people on here that know this better than I do. But I think that's one of the real struggles in the NFL is to get linemen who can come out of college and pick up the pro system, not just the terminology, but the footwork. All these things have to be picked up fairly quickly if you're going to be a lineman in the National Football League. And yeah, Slater walks in the door ready to go. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Again, he automatically improves the running game, and he'll protect for Herbert as well, too. And if those two things happen, the Chargers could be a really, really dangerous football team. Really dangerous.
Former Rams defensive coordinator Brandon Staley is the new head coach replacing Lynn. The nice thing with the Chargers and Rams sharing SoFi Stadium, Staley didn't have to move. Was this a good choice by general manager Tom Telesco?
We'll find out. Again, he didn't have to go very far to scout the guy, so that was certainly an easy part of his job. We'll find out. Again, so I think similar to the Raiders situation, another absolutely beautiful stadium as well, too. And it'll be nice to see it full of. Yeah, I mean, Staley did a really good job of the Rams. Again, we sort of looked at the offensive side of the Rams where the real genius was, and I think Staley did a great job. Now, again, there's no Aaron Donald playing for the Chargers, but, you know, you got Joey Bosa there. And if Derwin James can stay healthy, Derwin James 2 years ago was a wrecking ball, but he's been hurt the past 2 years. So if James can stay healthy and Bosa can stay healthy, they've got 2 real anchors on their team. That will surely improve the defense as well, too. And I think one of the things that Staley did so well with the Rams was he had pieces to play with, and he was very creative in the way that he used the defense. I think he'd like to do that same thing with the Chargers. But he needs the bodies on the field. And I think if Bosa and James are healthy, he'll have the same kind of flexibility he had with the Rams as well, too. We'll find out. Young guy, seems to be a good coach, communicates well. There's been a lot of talk about those famous words, culture change with the Chargers this year. And we'll see. You know, a lot of optimism around him. I think particularly on the defense. It's interesting because you go back like 3 years with the Chargers, when Phillip Rivers was still there, you know, the defense really carried them. Rivers last year was awful. He was terrible. The defense really played well. Last year, Herbert comes in, defense struggles with injuries, and now hopefully they're going to combine the strong defense and a better offense, and I think really be a good football team this year.
So you predicted the Raiders were a 10-6 team. I got to ask the same question for a prediction for the Chargers.
Well, again, let's look at the first 6 games for the Chargers. They start with Washington, Dallas, Kansas City, Raiders, Browns, and Ravens. And I think it's really important if you're a team that really is trying to build on something is to get a strong start. First 4, 5, 6 games of the year, you just got to play well. I think if we can get through the first 5 or 6 games, winning 3, maybe 2 of those, I'm picking them to win 11 games, which means I'm really picking the 2 wildcard teams to come out of the AFC West. I'm going to say they're going to be 11-5 team this year. I think that they might, again, steal one. I think they're good enough to be – they were competitive with the Chiefs on the field last year. I think they have the firepower. They can really stand up to the Chiefs with a terrific defense as well, too. So the Chiefs are still the sort of the class, but I wouldn't be. I'm going to pick the Raiders. I'm pick the Chargers to win 11 games this year.
You know what, Dave? I'm going to ask this question, and I'm going to
Here we go.
step away, and
Here
I'm
we
going to give you the floor, because we have been friends for almost 60 years. Here's your chance, Bubba. Has it been a pleasure or a sentence living next door to me?
Okay, where do we start? I won't take up a lot of your time with this, but we moved into our house in New Jersey. We were the first black family on the block. And it was either the day we moved in or the day after we moved in. Coming across the street, and just as cocky then as he is now, was Leo Haggerty. All right. And again, we've been lifelong friends ever since. We've been through good times, bad times. We were the kings of Stratomatic baseball for many, many years. Leo called me once when he was coaching college basketball in South Carolina. He says, you know, there's this fat kid down here in Auburn who's kicking everybody's butt in the SEC. His name is Charles Barkley. And I'm always struck by that today because the majority of people who watch Charles Barkley on TV never saw him play basketball. Leo introduced me to Charles Barkley. We've had a lot of fun together over the years. We're maybe two of the worst golfers in the world, but we don't care. We always have a good time. His wedding was still one that I remember to this day. Yeah, we've had a wonderful time. And again, I think a lot of what we do here, the sports stuff is me and Leo talking. It's just me and Leo talking because we've always done this. This is the way we've sort of lived our lives together too. He's got wonderful kids. He's a grandfather again, and I'm just so happy for him and Barb. Wonderful people. I won't talk about the Wild Boys. We'll leave them out of this conversation for right now. And won't go into all that as well too. But yeah, he's what you see is what you get with Leo Haggerty. He's always been the way he is now, and I say that both the good and the bad. I say that, but he's one of those genuine people I've ever known, and I love him to this day. I really do. I really do.
Hey,
that's enough.
Doc,
leave the stuff out. And the check better clear, Leo. The check better clear on the stories too. So.
Hey, I love. Did I spell your name right? That's all I care about.
Hey, Doc. Before I get to my next question, I just want to point out how I find it. I find it a little funny that the last 2 weeks, both of our "How did you get to know Leo" started off with him the cocky walking or doing something a little cocky. So it's a little interesting for that. But I guess just expanding on your career a little bit, you've been covering the NFL as scout correspondent for over 20 years. Other than Tom Brady still being there, what are two examples of things that's changed over your time covering the league?
Well, I think one of the, and this is sort of a personal thing with me. I think de-emphasizing the running game has hurt the National Football League. I really do. I think Leo and I have talked about this before. I think elevating the quarterback to this position where it's the quarterback and the rest of the team, I think has really hurt the NFL. Now, Brady is sort of an exception to the rule because he's got 7 rings, but I think too many franchises satisfying the needs of the quarterback has hurt the organization. And I think the number one place where I sort of see it is the running game. I think there are a lot of quality running backs. It sort of gets back to what we were talking about before, Adam, with offensive linemen who come to the NFL to pass block, and they don't know how to run block. So they find themselves in a difficult position as well, too. I think that's the one position where I think it's been hurt. I mean, outside of that, again, I think the whole injury issue, it's part of the game, so it's never going to go away. I am not a fan of the 17th game. I'll be very honest with you. I just don't. I realize the money. I realize that. The players realize that. But I just think it takes a beating on bodies, and you never recover. You just don't recover from these things. So those are the two things I think where I have sort of my biggest beef with the way that the game is played right now. I mean, again, it's football. We all love it. We can't wait for it to start again, and we'll all be there, at the first kickoff. But we ought to recognize, there are things about the game which, if they went better, I think would just improve the quality of the game. I really do. Better running games, and it's too late to take away the 17th game, but that's too late. I know that's not going to happen.
Our guest this evening has been KSP, that stands for Night Sports Production, AFC West correspondent, Dr. David Alexander. Dr. Dave, thanks for making the time to be in our It Sports Magazine TV. You've been a great interviewee, and we've really enjoyed, and hopefully you'll be back. And thank you so much for coming. And just remember, here at It Sports Mag TV, we're dedicated and devoted to you, the sports fan. See you next time.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, sir.